Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum. And
Hi.
this being Lesbian Visibility Week, we are joined by
Ann Northrup. Nice of you to invite me to join you, Andy, in Lesbian Visibility Week. And we are visible in our homes. I have switched rooms this week because I had a lot of breakup on the video and audio last week, and I have determined that if I plug into the router with an Ethernet cable, maybe that will be cured. So that's what I'm trying.
I have ordered similar technology. And, we're going to start this week in the news talking about a gay survivor of COVID-19 who was stopped from trying to donate his plasma to save another life.
Yeah, you thought we'd fix that, but it turns out we haven't. So that's a big story. We'll also tell you about how Pride events have now been canceled coast to coast and worldwide, and what they're going to do instead.
And I talked to a lot of our major and some smaller LGBTQ groups across the country and here in New York about how they're faring under these circumstances and how are they maintaining their services. I'll have a report on that.
We've told you before about Dr. Rachel Levine, the trans woman who was appointed health director. That's not the right title. I'll get to it.
It is.
In Pennsylvania. Well, she's now leading the whole state response to the pandemic.
Wow. We're going to also show you another protest against Franklin Graham's Samaritan's Purse by Rise and Resist, who also went to the Trump Tower to deliver a message to the president.
And if we have time, I think I'll read that note from someone who volunteered with them in New Jersey during Hurricane Sandy and was appalled by them. So I think that's interesting.
Yes.
We also will let you know about the latest tragic deaths from our communities from the coronavirus.
And stay tuned because we're going to tell you about a star-studded 90th birthday concert for Stephen Sondheim that is going to be live streamed on Sunday night that you can watch. And boy, are they stars.
Yeah, it's quite a lineup. We have several Sunday night entertainments to tell you about. But we'll start here in New York with the story of Lucas Estock.
Our neighbor.
Is he?
Yes, he lives in the building.
Well,
everybody lives here.
My line is everybody either has lived here, does live here, or will live here at some point.
There are 1,600 apartments here.
Yeah, in a building cut up into various segments. Andy and I live in different segments of the building. But Lucas is a guy who got the coronavirus and survived it. And he was so excited about surviving it and about hearing that as a gay man, he could now donate his plasma to help others survive because the window had diminished for gay men wanting to donate blood.
And also, he tested negative after a while for COVID-19. He really did survive this. And he's 36 years old. He did have somewhat of an underlying condition that he talked about on Facebook in terms of sort of exercise asthma or something like that. But, he survived it. And he said, I went through a month of hell with this virus. And then he gets to the New York Blood Center.
And he goes through several days of hell because as we've reported, the FDA decided that they would change the rules on blood donation for men who had sex with men. It used to be you couldn't donate at all, but then for a long time it was if you hadn't had sex with another man for a year, you could donate blood, but any little hanky-panky in between, forget it. So then, in the midst of this little disaster, they decided, well, maybe it doesn't have to be a year. We'll make it 3 months. That's a kind of new standard around the world. If you haven't had sex with another man for 3 months, you can donate blood. So Lucas,
there are some places that don't have basically any weight.
I would like you to tell me where they are because I'm only aware of the 3-month places. So anyway, Lucas trots himself off to donate blood or plasma, because now he's a special case. He's been through the virus. He's tested negative. He's got the antibodies, presumably, and he can now, with this lowered window, donate blood. But what do they say to him? Oh, no. You have to have not had sex with another man for a year. And he says, what the hell are you talking about? They just changed the rules. And they said, no, we have to go through a whole process. We have to change the forms. We have to train the staff.
This is insane.
They
said, we need 3 months to change the form. I mean, it's a simple thing. It used to be a year. Now it's 3 months.
Just cross it out.
I mean,
cross it out.
But we're they're still using their own. We're waiting for new forms.
And the really sad thing is,
we needed blood and plasma.
It's hideous. It's disgusting. And here's the other twist on this. Lucas is not the only one. When this news was announced that they were diminishing the window of deferral from 12 months to 3 months, hundreds, maybe thousands of gay men went to blood banks to try to donate blood, and they've all been turned away because they are being told that it takes months to go through the process of new forms and instructions to staff. We could do that training in an hour.
I've read up on the science.
Less.
I've read up on the science, and 500 health experts say we need a total end to the gay blood ban. The window is really 10 days. 10 days between the last.
At most.
At most, exactly. At most,
I've read 5.
10 days.
So they say they need approval from the American Association of Blood Banks and the FDA. 500 plus health professionals have now signed a letter to the FDA and the blood bank saying, you are out of your minds. You must change this immediately. We need these donations, and they're getting nowhere.
I have to say, I knew a guy, he knew he had no risk, basically, and he knew he had no risk, so he just used to go in and he lied,
I'm sure lots of people do that, and I see nothing wrong with that at all, except that they should all be lining up outside the blood bank and saying, take our blood. You're crazy. So thank you, Lucas. Glad you survived. I hope I bump into you here in London Terrace. And please.
Campus. He's been great though, because he is one of these. He got this COVID-19 early on, and he was open about it on Facebook, and he educated an awful lot of people that this is not just affecting old people like us.
Yeah.
All right.
So other heroes in the fight, we told you last week about how Reclaim Pride had held a press conference outside the Samaritan's tent, medical tents in Central Park to protest about Franklin Graham being given all this publicity and fundraising ability. Well, our sister group, Rise and Resist, went out the next day and started holding up signs like this, to complain about.
I think. Yeah, I'm not sure who that is. Islamophobia kills is the next sign.
Because Franklin Graham is as Islamophobic as he is homophobic.
Right, and then they held up this "Stop the Hate" banner right by the Billy Graham trailer. A chaplain ministry, rapid response team, Stop the Hate. They're really just running a prayer ministry. Talk about what happened to that guy who tried to help. Oh, and then they went to the Trump Tower and they held up their sign which says, "Trump lies, people die." And at least when they demonstrate in public, they are 6 feet apart, and the banner measures the 6 feet of them.
And the truck that we just showed in the previous picture is parked right on Fifth Avenue, right across from Mount Sinai Hospital. It is the biggest billboard you could imagine. So
Mount Sinai Hospital, headed by a gay man, and that's also where Lucas Estock went to donate blood, his plasma rather.
So after all of this, and after the New York Times did a big puff piece on Samaritan's Purse and talked about how great they were, and we got a lot of pushback from doing all this, and I was getting a little discouraged about it And then, Andy, I think you dug this up.
Well, it was in response to that New York Times story. There were a lot of comments. One of them was
from Sandy A. You referred to Sandy as a he. I think of Sandy as a she, but whatever. We don't know. But Sandy A. from Toms River, New Jersey, sent this letter to the New York Times. I have firsthand knowledge of Samaritan's Purse, and because I have absolutely no religious affiliation with them or any evangelical group, my perspective may be less biased. In the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, my 15-year-old son and I wanted to volunteer to help those who had nearby homes damaged by the storm and had seen that an organization called Samaritan's Purse was very active in the relief efforts in our area. I signed us up. I knew nothing of their religious beliefs other than they were a Christian organization. If they were here giving help freely to those in need, it didn't matter to me at the time. I was initially impressed with their efficiency and organizational skills, but it soon soured when we got on field. Instead of going to the homes of those who otherwise couldn't afford help, we went to a highly affluent neighborhood by the shore. Our job was to tear out the soggy, muddy insulation out of the crawl spaces of these $500,000 homes. No doubt they could have hired people to do it for them. I also witnessed almost immediately that the Samaritan's Purse group leader started to hand out Bibles to the homeowners and proselytize. Their motivation then became quite apparent, and I realized that their help was not freely given at all. I highly suspect that they purposely targeted the affluent neighborhoods in the hope of conversions and tantalizing tithing. I took my son that afternoon and never returned. I have no doubt they were looking for the same in Central Park.
And what the hell are they still doing in Central Park? Andrew Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, said, I don't need the comfort ship anymore. Let it go. We don't need them anymore. What the hell is Samaritan's Purse still doing there? It's an advertising platform.
Literally, because they are running ads on CNN, raising money and bragging about how wonderful they are.
I wonder if these half-dead patients know that they're being photographed and being used in ad campaigns for a bigoted organization. Anyway.
I sincerely doubt it. And if you go to their webpage about all their help around the world against the pandemic, you see a guy in Italy who says, God cured me. And you see patients in New York asking to be prayed over and helped with their...
And the Surgeon General of the United States, I have to dig up his name. He said, I was going to talk about him later, but he did say this week that this is all part of God's plan. This catastrophe is all part of God's plan. The Surgeon General of the United States, that young African-American guy who was a nudnik, he of course is a retread from Indiana under Mike Pence, who totally just screwed up the opioid crisis and the HIV crisis out there. Now, I want to tell one other sort of positive story, but very sobering story. It's about a New York City paramedic, a gay guy with the fire department, Joshua Rodriguez. He says, I can't go home and see my family now. I have not kissed my partner since this began. He talks of walking into homes where 3 or 4 family members are sick. This is what these folks are living through. But I like the fact that when they do these mainstream stories, they have no qualms about mentioning someone has a same-sex partner, a husband, etc. By the way, did you see this HRC survey of who's unemployed these days?
No.
It says 40% of all LGBT people, I don't know how they completely figure this, work in the 5 industries most affected by COVID: restaurants, food services, hospital, K-12 education, college, and retail, where only 22% of the people who work in those are heterosexual.
Well, and another job category, sex workers, of course, are not getting payments from the government or any other kind of help, and they are often still out on the streets. Some are working from home and doing online services and trying to get paid for those. But many are not equipped to do that, and they are out on the streets, and they are still taking clients, and it's just a very, very dangerous situation.
Well, somebody who's trying to make it less dangerous, and we've told you about her before, is the health director in the state of Pennsylvania, Dr. Rachel Levine. She is a trans woman.
Secretary of Health.
Yes, she's leading the fight there about COVID as his health secretary. Her Twitter feed and daily live briefings are being credited as offering calming but sobering advice, and she says she's working 7 days a week.
I bet she is. I'd like to hear some of her sobering advice. Oh, speaking of advice, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Health has put out guidelines how to have sex in an epidemic, which is the old title of the HIV pamphlet. So I don't think they're using that. But their basic line is, you are your safest sex partner. Because the virus has been found in saliva, not HIV, but the COVID virus is in saliva, mucus, feces. They have not found it in semen or vaginal fluid yet, but that doesn't mean that penetrative intercourse is safe. So what they recommend, if you're not willing to just have sex with yourself, is that you should limit the number of partners, which was also not our advice in HIV, but that's a whole different transmission scenario. Use condoms or dental dams. No kissing and no rimming, because both involve contact that could transmit the virus. And you may want to have sex online with people, and by all means, wash yourself, the other person, sex toys, anything. Just keep doing that washing. But it's guidelines from the New York City Department of Health. If you want to read the whole thing, go on their website and see what they have to say.
I can take care of myself. The other thing that you can do in a pandemic now in New York is get married. The governor has arranged that you can do it by video conferencing now. So if you need to get married, you can.
Yes.
By the way, another positive story, Housing Works is opening a 130-bed residence. This is a big AIDS service organization in New York, and medical care facility for homeless people just with COVID-19.
Right. Oh, a small headline, Brian Stokes Mitchell, the well-known actor, had it. He's recovering. So that's a little piece of good news.
I'll tell you more about him because he's in the Sondheim 90th birthday tribute. So, over the last couple of weeks, a lot of you know, I was very close friends with a couple who were together for 53 years. Danny Cook, we have a picture of them on top. Herb Cohen on the bottom there. Yes, there they are. They were a couple. They'd been together for a long time. They lived on Central Park West when it was affordable, but by the time they left, it was, you could sell the place for a lot of money. So I was able to distribute $2.8 million of their money right in the middle of this crisis to some of the major groups in New York and around the country. And so I decided didn't want to just let people know about what Herb and Danny did, which was a wonderful thing, but how are they doing? So I talked to them, like Sage got over $1 million here, and Sage has 35 staff at work calling 2,000 people a day. Every day they call 2,000 people to check in on them. How are they doing? Do you need anything? Do you need meals? They do that. The National LGBTQ Task Force, no layoffs. They're working on Queer the Vote. And of course, they're preparing us, by the way, for the decisions we're going to get on the Title VII cases from the Supreme Court, which are going to decide whether sex discrimination covers sexual orientation discrimination and gender identity discrimination. I talked to Lambda. They're again, all these places, their offices are closed, but Lambda, Kevin Jennings, only been there for 4 months, they're able to do filings online, and the right wing is doing filings online and still fighting them. At the center, the LGBT Community Center in New York, again, it's closed, but they're doing all kinds of things online, counseling services, groups, all that. And at GMHC, again, everything has gone online, meals. The only thing they're not able to do at GMHC is HIV testing, so they're sending people home test kits for HIV. So it's really encouraging. And of course, the group that they didn't get Herb and Danny money, but New Alternatives for Homeless LGBT Youth. Again, we can't have group meals anymore for the young people. So we've actually expanded the meal services, and they're now giving out hot meals every day at the door of the Metro Baptist Church there on West 40th Street. So.
Well, that's all great to hear, and I'm glad you were able to talk to all those people and find out what they're doing. On a slightly lighter note, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, notes that a lot of high school and college graduations are being canceled in the midst of this pandemic. So they're going to hold an online LGBTQ high school and college graduation on May 8th at 4 p.m. There will be a commencement address by someone, not announced who yet. There will be valedictorians speaking. There'll be music. There'll be all sorts of stuff. You have to go online to register for this at act.hrc.org, act.hrc.org for the May 8th high school and college graduation ceremony.
Send me a link to that, Ann, and I'll put it in our weekly email that goes
I
out.
will do that.
Anyone who subscribes by going to gayusatv.org, signing up for our newsletter, and more of you are signing up for our weekly newsletter because you get all these bonuses. Can we talk a little bit about what we're living through and how awful it is right now?
Sure.
And I mean, this has been one of the worst weeks. I mean, I can imagine. I mean, especially when you're reading about the absolute devastation in the nursing homes. And I started to compose a Republican platform for what they're really running on, which is like killing all these people off. Why? So they don't have to pay Social Security and Medicare, and they can, balance the budget, and killing off as many people of color as possible. This is the conscious policy of this administration, so that maybe they can, get rid of some votes in some of these swing states where the people of color were going to go against them. And the jails. I mean, the jails have become death traps. Yes, there's been some release of some prisoners, but I think they're making room for a lot of people that they want to round up if they hold on to power and put us all into prisons and things like that, especially with the ICE centers, totally unsafe. And again, get rid of all the people, kill off all the people in the current ICE centers, and, and I'm not exaggerating about this, and then, bring in a whole new group when you round them up. It's just...
I would call that a pretty dark scenario. Now, I would not want to underestimate the evil of the Trump administration, but are they allowing things to happen? Sure. Are they incompetent about taking care of stuff? Are they so screwed up that they really believe that they don't have any responsibility for stepping in? Yes. But do I think they're sitting around plotting the death of people? No, I don't.
Look at Attorney General Barr, all right?
Unbelievable.
A couple of weeks ago, what did he say? If you consciously spread this disease, we're going to get you on bioterrorism. That was a couple of weeks ago. Now he's saying, if you're a governor and you want to open things up and continue the spread, or if you're a governor and you're closing things down too tightly, I'm going to come in there and intervene. I mean, so that we can continue the spread. So who's the bioterrorist?
I understand and agree with you about what Barr has been saying, but let's talk about this stuff about the people who are out in the streets demanding opening up. I think they're crazy to want that. I think it's extremely dangerous, but there really is an imbalance in this country of affected areas versus non-affected areas, and people have lost their jobs, and they are desperate about the fact that their income has disappeared. And God knows this government is not doing anything real to support them. So they're out in the streets demanding it. I think they're stupid. I think it's wrong, but I understand their desperation.
They are funded, if you haven't read, by Robert Mercer, a billionaire
Yes.
right-winger, by the old David Koch people. He's dead.
Yes.
But his acolytes. They're funding these things. And let me tell you why Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, the prime reason, beyond wanting to kill people of color, and so we might get reelected, the prime reason he's doing it is they have a cap on unemployment benefits. If they order the businesses opened up and then you don't go back to your job, you don't get unemployment. And this is his strategy.
I don't disagree with any of that, and I agree that the Koch brothers and all those people are exploiting the people who they have sent out into the streets.
I'm not underestimating the pain of people who are home and not getting a paycheck, and we should have basic pay for everybody. Thank you, Andrew Yang, and anybody else promoting that. We should have that. But we're all voting with our actions. We're complying voluntarily with most of these things because we don't want to die. You know, that was the other piece of the piece I wrote for the Gay City News, which if it's on about Herb and Danny and all the money that came into these groups, is everybody is doing wills or trying to get their affairs in order, healthcare proxies. It's in my article, and it'll be linked to where you could go to gaycitynews.com. I hope by the time this comes out. But one of the things I just want to say it to people, if you do have assets and you can't do a will, I mean, you can do a will. I mean, there's a way to do it where you just have two people sign it and you sign it. They're not in the will. But you can also designate your accounts, your bank accounts, your brokerage accounts, any kind of things like that you have to bypass your will and pass to organizations or individuals that you would like to leave it to.
And I'm taking care of all of that too for myself. But we are in New York. We have our own skewed view of this. And I'm not trying to diminish the danger of the pandemic, but our view of imminent danger is different from people around the country.
All right. But then you look at South Dakota, where there are these enormous outbreaks and these
in the meatpacking plant, yes.
And that gets out into the community and it doesn't stop.
Agreed. I'm not suggesting that people aren't in danger. I'm just saying there are different perceptions of danger in different places in the country.
And then, you know, I read that there are different strains of the virus. We might have gotten a particularly virulent one. I posted this article on Facebook, and then Mark Harrington from TAG, Treatment Action Group, said, you're misinformed, you know, but, you know, we don't know. There's so much we don't know. All right. Should we talk about some of the people we've lost?
In a second. I have one more footnote to go back to the Franklin Graham stuff. He is not just working here in New York to toot his own horn and raise money. He's also working in Alaska. The governor of Alaska, Mike Dunleavy, is praying with preachers in public and on the phone with Franklin Graham and others to do whatever the heck he's doing.
Well, we've got, look, a mayor and a governor in New York who are constantly invoking God and faith leaders and things like that. It's not quite as overboard as the governor of Alaska, but they do it a lot here as well.
Should we talk about the pride stuff before we get to as we've lost, or not?
Sure. No, we should.
All right, well, Heritage of Pride here in New York has finally, at the behest of the mayor, canceled its June 28th plans for the annual Pride March, this year celebrating the first March 50 years ago, which was a year after the Stonewall Rebellion. It's really the mayor closing this down, although Hop says we worked with the mayor to do this together. I don't quite buy that. But Hop is now joining with the worldwide online Pride that's going to take place for 24 hours on Saturday, June 27th. It's going to be, you know, stars,
speeches, music, singing,
fundraising.
drop in at any time.
Yes,
You know,
it's like the New Year's Eve celebrations where they show you the fireworks every hour around the world. I'm sure there'll be fireworks for this.
or the marathon reading of James Joyce's Ulysses.
Not quite as interesting. But the Reclaim Pride is now, we have a conference call tonight to discuss what we're going to do. But the interesting thing to me is that this leaves open Sunday, the 28th, because the online thing is going to be the 27th. So we're going to discuss whether we're going to do something online that's a little more engaging and
Stonewall.
provocative. And I'll report on that as we go along with our discussions. I have some ideas too that may be more in person. We'll see.
Stonewall was a riot.
Yeah.
By the way, Mark Haney, someone we know from the movement, who's a big universal healthcare activist, he said, Pride has been postponed to Tuesday, November 3rd, Election Day, when we need to go to the polls and do what we can to stop this fascist regime.
Hear, hear. Also, Reclaim Pride. In the meantime, we talked about the Samaritan's Purse demo last week, or press conference, and we'll be doing more on that. But another part of Reclaim Pride is very involved in mutual aid efforts around New York City. And there are dozens of organizations that have banded together to recruit volunteers and donations and work with people who need help and aren't getting help from the standard government entities. If you go to mutual aid, let me get this right, mutualaid.nyc, you'll see the very rudimentary website they've put up that tells you how to volunteer or donate or get involved in their efforts. It's really good. I've looked at it, and lots of opportunities there, and really substantive, really doing something.
Now, last week we told you about the passing of Phyllis Lyon, the great activist, with her wife, Del Martin, and she was 95 years old. Del had died some years ago. But now we're learning that the Lyon Martin and Women's Community Clinic in San Francisco is in dire straits, and on the heels of the death of Phyllis there. So we'll put something in the email about that. They were able to save City Lights bookstore, which people seem to have a lot of sentimentality about. They raised $500,000 in no time, but to keep the staff on. But this is a health clinic in an epidemic. So we'll see. We'll tell you more about that in our email. All right. Some of the people we've lost.
Yes.
Well, we learned in San Antonio that the out council member, Tony Brooks Tsai, TSAI, and his husband, Philip Ty Brooks.
It might be Shay.
Shay, I'm sorry, I mispronounced.
I'm guessing TSAI.
Yes. Philip owned a hair salon. They died within hours of each other of the virus this past week, and they're going to be buried together at the Fort Sam Houston Cemetery. Philip's mom lived with them and is also infected, and it's just a heartbreaking story.
It is completely. Also in Florida, Tom Carr, 67 years old, Daniel Thomas Carr was his full name. He's there on the left. Is he on the left?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Pianist, philanthropist, real estate agent. He was the third person to die after attending the NGLTF winter party. Now, I say that because that's the way it's being reported. There is clearly no proof that any of them got the virus at the party, but the fact is that 3 who attended the party have died. His husband there on the right, Dr. J. Michael Heider, Heider, survives him. They were together for 35 years. And Tom was quite a beloved member of the community in Florida, in Miami.
That party, which was a mass party, and obviously probably did produce a cluster of cases. I mean, but that was March 4th through the 9th. I mean, you and I were going to the theater on March the 7th. I was ready to go to the theater on March the 12th when the Broadway was canceled, although I decided not to. So that was the time when and the mayor of New York was saying, oh, go to a restaurant if you're healthy, that kind of stuff at that time.
And the fact is, as we know, you can be asymptomatic and have the virus. So saying if you're healthy is not a good answer.
Let's repeat that, because apparently half the people who have this don't even get symptoms, and they're walking around with the virus and they're spreading it. And that's why we have, the only people who seem to be able to get tested in most places are people who are sick, which is insane. And the only way we're going to get back to work is, you hear this on the news all day long, and then Trump says, we got all the tests we need. Well, you listen to him more than I do.
And the question for me is, if we're waiting until people are really desperately ill before we bring them into treatment, is that really the right response? Again, it sounds like HIV. We were waiting till people's T cells fell to some horrendously low amount before we put them on drugs. But as we went along and as we got better drugs, we realized that the earlier you treat people, the better outcomes they have. And we've got to get to a point where we can treat people with this virus early to prevent them from getting in that dire situation where they have to be intubated and put on ventilators.
And despite the fact that the president had the federal government buy up millions of chloroquine pills, that's now been proven not to work. Juan Gonzalez over at Democracy Now! Said his mother was sick, and when he went to the hospital, he said, what are you doing with her? Oh, we're giving her chloroquine. He said, no. He stopped them. They were giving it to every single patient, and they were killing a lot of them off that way.
Well,
I'm not, again, people, it's like a desperate treatment. Look, in the beginning with AIDS, AZT, it really didn't extend life on its own in the beginning. It gave you some relief a little bit, but you really ended up dying at the same rate anyway.
Well, part of that was because the dosages they started with were astronomically high. And they realized eventually that was true, and they cut the doses to, a quarter or a tenth of what they were giving, and it worked a lot better that way. Right. But treatment has got to be a high priority here, and we're not doing anything much with that, and certainly not early in the disease.
We also lost a guy named Kenneth Lewis, 75 years old, the author of The Psychoanalytic Theory of Male Homosexuality. He was a clinical psychologist and historian, once a professor of Renaissance literature at Rutgers. But his book in 1988 tracked the politicized, moralistic, and occasionally objective theories of male homosexuality from Freud, who he saw as somewhat more benevolent in his day, to the benighted dogmatism of Freud's followers, who were a lot of homophobes, like Edmund Bergler, who said gay men were merciless and unscrupulous, and Charles Socarides, who said homosexuality is a masquerade of life. Now, he wrote scholarly works, and when the book came out, by the way, when the book came out in 88, he was interviewed in the Times. He refused to say whether he was gay. Well, he was gay, and I know people who knew him in the 60s. But he has gone at 75 of COVID.
Yeah, well, the whole point of his book was to debunk the psychoanalytic theory of male homosexuality, and it was quite a bombshell at the time.
Well, think about it. We knew Dick Isay, who was in this whole psychoanalytic field, and his organization didn't change its sickness theory of homosexuality until 1991, too. That was when they finally changed. I mean, the American Psychiatric Association did it in 73, but not these Freudians.
I was also sad to learn of the death of Vittoria Repetto. Yes. She was a poet and chiropractor.
Yes.
Quite a combo. But she was a real activist in the community, very aggressive about doing things. She ran poetry events at the Blue Stockings shop here in New York. Vittoria was a tough cookie.
Yes. I heard her read at the LGBT Community Center with our friend Linda Whalen Quinlan. They were both lesbian activists. She Vittoria grew up in the Italian West Village.
Mhm.
and wrote a lot about that experience as well. But that was a
She was
memorable evening.
she was 69. She was angry at a lot of people. But one of the one of the things I remember most about Vittorio is she was part of a little group of us who, in the Dyke March years ago, formed a contingent called the Magic Wand Marching Band.
Yes, I think I have pictures of that.
I do. I have a picture. I should have pulled it up. We venerated Betty Dodson as the queen of masturbation, and we marched down Fifth Avenue with a big banner and carrying Hitachi magic wands. It was a fun afternoon. So Vittorio made a big impression in this city and will definitely be missed.
And they're all sad stories, but here's one. Ed Shaw, 79 years old. This guy's African-American, survived AIDS for 32 years, and he succumbed to COVID-19. He said he was devastated when he was diagnosed with HIV in 1988 at the age of 47, and it took him a while to come out about it or even do anything about it.
5 years before he went for treatment.
But he said, HIV is something you shouldn't have to go through alone. There's always someone somewhere that you can talk to. You're never alone. And of course, this horrible thing about this disease is you do mostly die alone if you're in the hospital because nobody can be around you. I mean, other than the doctors. He was beloved in the long-term survivor community. He became an activist and he encouraged others to be open about their status.
And coming out about it and getting on treatment changed his life. Oh, yeah. It really brought him out of his shell and his depression, and becoming an activist really gave him a fuller life.
You know, he sat his family down after those 5 years and he told them, and he said his sister came over, everybody came over and hugged and kissed him.
Yeah. And finally, Iris Love, speaking of a pistol, died at 87.
Is on the right with Liz Smith, her longtime partner, the
right
columnist.
So Iris on the right there was a well-known archaeologist who was famous for discovering Aphrodite's temple in Turkey many years ago.
1969.
Yes. And she was sort of a socialite about town. She came from prominent families.
She was the Guggenheims and Alexander Hamilton were direct descendants.
As I said, prominent families. She was funny, sarcastic, brilliant. But one thing that she was very well known for was raising dachshunds and participating in the Westminster Kennel Club show, which she won one year. But Iris and her dachshunds, and Iris and Liz Smith were sort of the main images of Iris.
They bonded. I mean, she and Liz basically bonded over the love of dogs.
Okay. They also fought a lot and did not, at some point they ended their partnership, but they were entwined and now they're together again.
We also lost an old enemy, Noack Deer. He was a city council member when we were all fighting for the the gay and lesbian rights bill in New York in 1986. It took 15 years to pass it here. But at the end, most of the opponents didn't want to talk about it. They would just want to vote against it. And he was the one who became famous as the lead guy against it. He was 66, my age. But he went on to become, he was really a nasty piece of work, horrible. Mm-hmm. But he went on to become a judge. And as a judge, I don't know if he mellowed on gay stuff, but he was famous for taking on cops who were arresting people of color disproportionately, especially on their stoops when they were drinking. They'd come into his court and he'd say, did you test the sample of this for the amount of alcohol that it was? Well, dismissed. He says, you never bring white people in here on these charges.
Mm-hmm.
That was to his credit.
Yes.
He did not get along. 1986. Oh, and by the way, we talked a lot about Tarlik last week, 2 weeks ago, who died. But I always called him Tarlik. I never learned how to pronounce his last name. He was Irish. He was an Irish gay activist, but he was born Terence Nellis in Belfast. And he changed his name to Tarlik McNeilish. So, and he worked for an organization for people with developmental disabilities for 35 years and died at the age of 57.
It's not unlike the AIDS crisis. This pandemic is robbing us of such rich lives, and it's just an enormous loss with every last one of them. That poor 5-year-old girl who we heard about this week. What a smile on her face in those pictures.
Both her parents worked in like EMS, those kinds of things? Or
maybe, yes. Yes. And just heartbreaking, the whole thing, and every single loss. So we want to make sure to remember those we knew or knew of every week. But now we will move on to other subjects.
Other news. I mean, not everybody's dying of COVID. People are still getting murdered. In this case, a transgender woman in Baltimore. She was from, I believe, Pennsylvania, but she was in Baltimore on a recovery program, and she was stabbed to death. Joanna Metzger. The Baltimore Safe Haven organized an online vigil for her, but she's I believe, the 6th transgender woman murdered this year.
Yes, terrible. Also, well, not murders, but other things in that general category. In Louisiana, in Iberia Parish, Lambda Legal Defense and Liam Pierce have settled a suit with the sheriff's office. Liam Pierce is living with HIV. He was a longtime employee in the sheriff's office, and he had applied for a job as a deputy sheriff. And in going through the physical exam, he had very matter-of-factly revealed that he was living with HIV. And they said, oh, no job as a deputy sheriff for you. So he went to court with Lambda's help, and they have just settled finally after several years. He gets $90,000. The sheriff's office also, in addition, has to pay Lambda for the legal fees and agree to all sorts of training and non-discrimination rules. But it's just horrid to think this still goes on.
And don't forget, this was all covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's how HIV was covered in terms of discrimination. And that was passed in the George Bush Senior administration.
Yeah.
So it was always there. We didn't need an extra bill for protection for people with HIV. We still don't have any federal protections. Well, we don't have any. We don't have our federal LGBTQ rights bill. In
Texas,
yes.
In Texas, a lesbian judge, Judge Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez in Bexar County, which is around San Antonio, has been ordered to remove the rainbow flag you see there on the left in her courtroom.
Not just the flag. He has to take down a rainbow pen, eyeglasses, and mouse pad, and how do you say this? A serape. Serape, which is a traditional Mexican cloth, because a defense attorney complained that pride symbols are similar to swastikas and the Confederate flag, and they show bias.
The defense attorney said the judge was exhibiting legalized immorality, infecting our nation like a virus. He described her showing of the flag as extremely repugnant and an abuse of power. So he complained to the Judicial Commission and Judicial Conduct State Commission. The State Commission agreed with him, made her remove all these things, and kept the proceedings secret. Well, you would think with a judge and a state commission that the proceedings would be public, but no, it's all secret.
Judge Gonzalez is having none of it. She complained about having to display the Texas flag in her courtroom, a state where her own LGBTQ people are not safe or protected.
I like that judge.
Oh, by the way, before we forget, I mentioned the census. Now the task force is working on it. Go to my2020census.gov. yourself, if you have not done your form yet, even if you haven't gotten a special code in the mail, you can fill out the form based on your address.
Really, really important. Please do that if you haven't already. My 2020 census.gov. Really crucial to fill that out.
3 minutes.
I was going to say it took me 30 seconds, but maybe you got the long form.
No, no, I have a roommate. He doesn't live here. He's living in Lisbon right now. But I mean, he had to be counted somewhere in the United States, and this is where his address is. So I had to ask him how he was related to me.
Friends, good friends.
Yes.
And in Michigan, they have been trying to do non-discrimination laws there, and now they've got a new plan where they're going to try to get the legislature to pass a law that will amend their civil rights law by defining sex, the prohibition on sex discrimination, to include gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. They need to collect 340,000 online signatures to provoke the process to bring a citizens bill to the legislature. And if they can do that, then the legislature has 40 days to amend the Civil Rights Act. Well, the big three auto companies, Ford, Chrysler, and GM, have now signed on to this campaign and are supporting this effort to amend the Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender identity.
Down to our last 7 minutes. So let's try to whip through some international news.
In Poland,
yes.
We're up to Poland. Yes. A gay couple is making rainbow virus masks. There they are.
They gave them away in the streets of Gdansk to a great reception. We'll include a video. It's quite charming of them handing these things out. Well, these old people go, yeah, I know what it is. It's fine.
They're trying to fight the virus and homophobia at the same time.
This is what Gilbert Baker would be doing if he was with us, and some of his friends are doing it in his name.
And in Canada, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as a result of the virus and businesses shutting down, a longtime legendary gay bar, Men's and Molly's, has been forced to close forever. They're not going to reopen. They've been there for 15 years. They're a very central meeting place for the community, and they're gone.
The head of British intelligence, MI5, apologized for the past treatment of LGBTQ staff as he was on his way out the door. Gay and bi people were barred from intelligence services until 1991. So he ended it while he was working there.
He said it caused all sorts of hurt, and it's a matter of regret and shame for all of us. By the way, as we're doing this, I noticed a news item coming in that Richard Grenell, acting director of intelligence, I use that term loosely, for the Trump administration, is pushing a thing where the United States will refuse to share intelligence with countries that ban homosexuality in an attempt to force them to change their laws.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I report the news.
Thank you. In Finland, marriage equality 3 years ago, now they're allowing the first adoptions by same-sex couples.
A lesbian couple and a gay male couple are the first to adopt. In Chile, the Constitutional Court has rejected marriage, says civil unions are enough, but of course the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has mandated marriage. And in Colombia, I don't quite understand this because I couldn't read the article in Spanish, the Constitutional Court there refused an attempt to strike down a law that says the point of marriage is procreation.
Well, actually, the quote is, the ultimate end of marriage is procreation. Now, some heterosexuals take offense at that.
Well, some would say that procreation is the end of marriage, but that's a whole other discussion. In Morocco, some woman went on Instagram to urge her friends to lure men on Grindr and Hornet and Planet Romeo to out them.
And very discouraging to read a study from the United Kingdom about how a third of British moms in same-sex relationships say they're harassed by other parents, their kids are harassed at school. I mean, you know, we know a lot of this, but you think of these countries as making progress, and to see that a third still experience this, you know, your kids are not welcome in my home, all that kind of stuff.
Come on, you go to London all the time. Don't you find, maybe you don't get out of London, but I think of England as a very 50s kind of country.
No, it's still 1936, no matter when it is.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Okay.
In Australia, they too are talking about changing the blood donation deferral window from 12 months to 3 months. People are up in arms and saying, get over yourselves. The 3 months is still not good enough. That fight will continue.
Down to our last couple of minutes here. J. August Richards, a star actor on the series Angel, which is a Buffy the Vampire Slayer spinoff, just came out as gay because he took a gay role on a new NBC drama, Council of Dads. And he says, look, I got into this industry to combat oppression. And he knew he could not portray a gay man and not be out himself. And the new show also features a transgender child.
Is it a drama or is it a comedy? I didn't notice that. He's going to be a married dad with a daughter, Council of Dads. Coming up this Thursday, we're broadcasting on Wednesday. If you see this after Thursday, you can catch up with it on HBO. We're Here. Drag queens go around America and put on drag shows in small towns. The drag queens are Bob the Drag Queen, Shangela, and Eureka from RuPaul's show.
All right. I get a ton of, organizations telling me online entertainment, from people's living rooms.
Yes.
Some of it is, Michael Urie was very good, and Byron Seller, I watched that the other day. But this Sunday at 8 o'clock, the 90th birthday concert for Stephen Sondheim, streaming. Sunday, go to Broadway.com, and it's on YouTube. The host is Raul Esparza. I got to read these names. Meryl Streep, Bernadette Peters, Patti LuPone, Mandy Patinkin, Audra McDonald, Christine Baranski, Donna Murphy, Christine Chenoweth, Sutton Foster, Brian Stokes Mitchell, Kelly O'Hara, Maria Friedman, Katrina Lenk, Michael Cerveris, Brandon Aronowitz, Stephen Schwartz. It goes on. What this is, as they jaw-dropping in terms of assemblage.
Well, I will either be watching that and recording this. Vita is coming back to Stars this Sunday. It's the East Los Angeles, largely lesbian show. Now, season 3, it will be its last season, which is too bad because it's a fabulous show. Vita, V-I-D-A, on Stars Sunday night.
And the producers of the Richard Greenberg play Take Me Out, the revival with Jesse Tyler Ferguson, says, well, we're rescheduling for the fall. I don't know.
Good luck.
I don't know.
A lot of stuff's getting canceled for the fall.
Yes, 30 seconds.
Okay. There are a lot of other online entertainments. GLAAD is doing something soon. The Stonewall Inn with their charitable group, Stonewall Gives Back, is doing something this week. You can look around if that's what you're looking for.
And we are very happy to be with you. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope to be here next week.
And no breakup this week. Yay!
Yay!
See you next week.